Right now, deep within your vascular system, a silent biological negotiation may be unfolding without your knowledge. Your body could be fighting an intense, round-the-clock battle to keep your blood sugar in a perfectly healthy range, while hiding a dramatic metabolic breakdown happening just beneath the surface. Standard medical checkups routinely miss this breakdown because routine laboratory panels focus almost exclusively on blood glucose, a biomarker that often remains deceptively normal until up to 2 decades after internal dysfunction has already taken root. By looking only at sugar levels rather than the hormone managing them, millions of people walk out of their doctor's office with a clean bill of health, completely unaware that their cells are actively resisting insulin. At APGAR Medical Insights, our investigation into metabolic physiology highlights a critical truth. The body will strain its endocrine architecture to absolute capacity before allowing blood sugar to spill out of control. Insulin is the primary master hormone responsible for energy storage and cellular fuel partitioning. When tissues become desensitized to its signals, the pancreas compensates by churning out increasingly massive quantities of insulin to force glucose into stubborn cells. This state, known as hyperinsulinemia, keeps blood sugar stable on paper, but circulating high levels of insulin quietly trigger distinct physiological warnings throughout the body. Understanding these early signals allows us to intervene long before full-scale metabolic failure occurs. The first subtle warning sign is experiencing sharp hunger or intense carbohydrate cravings, roughly 1 to 2 hours after finishing a meal. Under normal metabolic conditions, eating prompts a moderate release of insulin that smoothly shuttles dietary glucose into cells, after which both sugar and hormone levels gently baseline. However, when cells resist insulin's key, the pancreas overreacts by secreting a massive wave of the hormone. This sudden insulin spike forces blood glucose down at an unnaturally rapid rate. Current endocrinological research demonstrates that it is not necessarily a low absolute blood sugar number that triggers intense hunger, but rather the steep velocity of the drop itself. Your brain senses this rapid downward trajectory as an impending energy crisis, driving an urgent impulse to eat again shortly after you just sat down for dinner. The second red flag is a severe postprandial energy crash, commonly known as the afternoon slump. When you digest a meal, breakdown products enter the bloodstream to be converted into cellular energy, known as ATP. In healthy tissue, a small amount of insulin allows this fuel to pass effortlessly through cellular membranes. But when hyperinsulinemia and cellular resistance take hold, the doors remain locked. While plenty of glucose circulates in the blood, very little actually penetrates the interior of muscle and organ cells. The resulting paradox is cellular starvation in the midst of external plenty. Deprived of its essential fuel source inside the cytoplasm, your mitochondria cannot maintain baseline energy output, causing you to experience profound physical fatigue and heavy lethargy after eating. Third, many individuals develop persistent brain fog, difficulty focusing, or reduced cognitive processing speed. While the brain accounts for only about 2% of total body weight, it consumes nearly 20% of the body's glucose-derived energy. Unlike skeletal muscle, neural tissue relies on specialized transporters to shuttle insulin across the protective blood-brain barrier. Scientific studies indicate that these transport mechanisms are saturable. When peripheral insulin levels remain chronically elevated day after day, these transporter proteins become saturated and subsequently downregulate. Consequently, less insulin reaches central neural structures, impairing regional brain glucose utilization. Deprived of efficient energy signaling, neurons struggle to fire optimally, resulting in cognitive fatigue, memory slips, and a feeling of mental cloudiness. Sign number 4 is a gradually expanding waistline, even if your total weight on the bathroom scale remains relatively unchanged. Insulin is fundamentally a storage-promoting, anabolic hormone whose biological mandate is to synthesize and preserve energy reserves. When circulating levels remain elevated, insulin directs excess calories toward hepatic processing, where they are converted into triglycerides and stored directly within abdominal visceral tissue. Visceral fat, the deep fat surrounding internal organs like the liver, pancreas, and intestines, is densely packed with both insulin and cortisol receptors, compared to the subcutaneous fat located just beneath the skin. Over time, as age and physical inactivity contribute to subtle muscle loss, fat accumulates centrally, creating a physical profile known in clinical medicine as TOFI. Thin on the outside, fat on the inside. The fifth indicator is an inability to lose body fat, despite strictly adhering to a calorie-restricted diet and exercising regularly. Inside adipose tissue, an enzyme called hormone-sensitive lipase, or HSL, is responsible for breaking down stored fat molecules so they can enter the bloodstream and be burned for fuel. However, hormone-sensitive lipase is exquisitely sensitive to insulin. Even modest elevations in circulating insulin act as a chemical lock, completely inhibiting HSL activity. When insulin levels never drop to a low baseline throughout the day, your body remains trapped in continuous storage mode. Even in a calorie deficit, your cells are blocked from accessing stored body fat for fuel, driving down your baseline metabolic rate and triggering intense physiological preservation signals instead of weight loss. Sign number 6 appears on standard cholesterol panels as a dangerous skew in lipid ratios, high blood triglycerides paired with low HDL cholesterol. When liver cells become insulin resistant, they upregulate the production and export of very low-density lipoproteins, or VLDLs, which flood the bloodstream with fat molecules. In circulating blood, these excess triglycerides interact with high-density lipoprotein, or HDL, particles through an enzymatic exchange process. This exchange enriches HDL with triglycerides while stripping away its protective cholesterol core. These lipid-altered HDL particles become structurally small and dense, causing the kidneys to rapidly clear them from circulation. Consequently, total HDL levels plummet, leaving behind an atherogenic environment driven directly by hyperinsulinemia. The seventh warning sign is a slow, insidious creeping up of baseline blood pressure. Long before elevated blood sugar causes structural damage to microvascular blood vessels, high circulating insulin directly communicates with the kidneys. Specifically, hyperinsulinemia stimulates the renal tubules to reabsorb significantly higher amounts of sodium and water back into systemic circulation, expanding total blood volume. Simultaneously, insulin resistance impairs the endothelial lining of blood vessels, reducing its ability to produce nitric oxide, the primary molecule responsible for dilating arteries. The combination of fluid retention and constricted blood vessels forces the heart to pump against higher resistance, pushing baseline blood pressure readings steadily into pre-hypertensive territory despite perfectly normal blood glucose. Eighth on the list is disrupted sleep, characterized by sudden awakenings during the middle of the night, particularly between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. During nocturnal fasting hours, your body must maintain stable blood sugar levels to fuel basic autonomic functions without incoming food. In a healthy system, this is managed smoothly through low-level glycogen release. But in an insulin-resistant state, blood glucose stability overnight becomes erratic. As blood sugar begins to dip too rapidly, the central nervous system perceives a potential emergency and triggers an aggressive counter-regulatory stress response. Adrenaline and cortisol are released to force the liver to produce glucose. This sudden surge of nocturnal adrenaline acts like an internal alarm bell, snapping you wide awake with a racing heart or an unexpected feeling of alertness in the dead of night. Sign number 9 is elevated serum uric acid levels, which can manifest as subtle joint discomfort or full-blown gout attacks. Uric acid is a natural byproduct of purine metabolism, and the kidneys are tasked with filtering and excreting excess amounts through urine. Clinical studies demonstrate that high levels of circulating insulin directly compete with uric acid for transport mechanisms in the renal tubules, effectively blocking uric acid excretion and driving up blood concentrations. When serum uric acid becomes overly saturated, sharp monosodium urate crystals can deposit directly into joint cartilage, most famously in the big toe, causing intense localized inflammation. Rising uric acid often serves as one of the earliest measurable biomarkers of metabolic dysfunction, shifting upward years before fasting glucose breaks out of normal ranges. The 10th and most decisive indicator of hidden metabolic distress is a high fasting insulin level paired with an elevated HOMA-IR score, even when fasting blood sugar looks completely pristine. HOMA-IR, or the homeostatic model assessment of insulin resistance, is a mathematical formula that calculates the mathematical relationship between fasting glucose and fasting insulin. A healthy, metabolically flexible individual might have a fasting glucose of 90 mg per deciliter and a low fasting insulin level of around 3 to 4 microunits per milliliter, producing an optimal HOMA-IR score close to 1.0. However, if another individual has that exact same fasting glucose of 90 but requires a fasting insulin level of 18 to keep it there, their HOMA-IR score jumps to over 4.0. Physically, their body is working 4 times harder to maintain the illusion of normal blood sugar. This physiological compensation explains why blood glucose is fundamentally the last domino to fall in the progression toward type 2 diabetes. For 10, 15, or even 20 years, the pancreatic beta cells can successfully ramp up insulin production to override tissue resistance, keeping circulating sugar flat and within standard laboratory reference ranges. It is only when the pancreas finally becomes exhausted and can no longer keep pace with the overwhelming demand that blood sugar levels suddenly spike. Relying solely on fasting glucose to assess metabolic health is equivalent to waiting for an engine to catch fire before checking the oil pressure. It measures the point of complete system failure rather than the decades of progressive strain leading up to it. The tragedy of modern healthcare is that insulin resistance and metabolic decay are almost universally treated as sugar problems rather than insulin problems. Global health systems spend trillions of dollars annually conducting routine blood sugar checks, prescribing glucose-lowering medications, and advising patients on glycemic management, while completely ignoring the underlying hyperinsulinemia driving vascular inflammation, weight gain, hypertension, and cognitive decline. Worse still, standard pharmaceutical approaches for type 2 diabetes often involve administering exogenous insulin or taking secretagogues that force the pancreas to pump out even more insulin. While this artificially lowers blood glucose, it floods the body with the exact hormone causing the cellular desensitization in the first place, exacerbating root-cause insulin resistance over time. Reclaiming your metabolic destiny requires shifting focus away from delayed proxy metrics and addressing cellular sensitivity directly. At APGAR Medical Insights, evidence-based research strongly supports advocating for comprehensive lab testing that includes fasting insulin, HbA1c, a full lipid panel, and uric acid. Simple lifestyle adjustments, such as prioritizing resistance training to increase muscle glucose disposal, prioritizing restorative sleep, adopting nutrient-dense whole food diets that minimize refined carbohydrates, and practicing strategic meal timing can rapidly restore cellular insulin sensitivity. By catching hyperinsulinemia in its early, silent stages, you empower your body to heal from within, ensuring long-term cellular vitality, metabolic longevity, and sustained health for decades to come.